Well, it's great to be wacky. Easy for me not to say. It's great to be back with you here for Hour 2 on Catholic Answers Live. My name is Patrick Coffin, and we'll segue from the heavens to the earth, and we'll talk about the union of one man and one woman. You know, couples have been hooking up permanently for a long time. That's as long as human history has been recorded, there's been a man and a woman mating for life, for the sake of the children, for the sake of the structural integrity of society. And as we all know, unless you've been on the planet Zorkon, the institution of marriage, the idea of one man, one woman for life, is now under attack from several different angles in this state and in other states. And here to talk about it is Dr. Jennifer ROBACK MORSE. She's the founder and president of the Ruth Institute, which is a non-profit educational institute promoting lifelong married love at home, at work, and in the public square. Dr. Morse is also the senior research fellow in economics at the Acton Institute for the Study of Religion and Liberty, and the author of Smart Sex, Finding Lifelong Love in a Hookup World. And her book, Love and Economics, has been recently reissued in paperback, and it's called Love and Economics. It takes a family to raise a village. And in studio, we say hi to Dr. Jennifer ROBACK MORSE.
Thanks for having me in, Pat. I'm delighted to be out here in El Cajon again.
Now, you're the other Dr. J.
I am.
I can see that you are not the basketball legend.
Now, I am Dr. J the shorter, in case you're keeping track.
He's the taller or the
He's
greater?
the taller. The taller, the faster, whatever.
Okay, well, listen, before we talk about marriage itself and why it's under attack and what the answer is to that attack, tell me about the Ruth Institute. How did you get the idea for it, and what are its goals?
I got the idea for the Ruth Institute because I've been doing a lot of lecturing on college campuses, a lot on law schools as the guest of the Federalist Society, and I came to see that there are a lot of young people who want lifelong married love, but they're completely clueless about how to do it. And the reason they want it so much is because they've already been through divorce. By the time they get to college, a lot of kids have had 2 or 3 divorces, namely their parents' divorces. A lot of them don't have family trees. They have family shrubs because they've just sort of expanded the number of partners that their parents have. Each parent is on to a different partner, kind of a thing. And so a lot of young people, I find, want lifelong married love. They don't want that for their kids, what they went through, but they have no idea what to do. And so I feel like it is a great opportunity for evangelization, not only Catholic evangelization, but natural law evangelization, because this is good common sense. And it turns out that all the social science research now supports what the Church has always been saying, that lifelong love between a man and a woman is the best place for both the family, for the children, for the couple, and for the good of the overall society. So the goal of the Ruth Institute is to promote lifelong married love to young people by creating an intellectual and social climate that's favorable to marriage. And I can tell you, Pat, if you're on a college campus, you know that the atmosphere is neither intellectually hospitable nor is it socially hospitable. The poor kids have to deal with the hookup culture and all kinds of pressure to do things that are simply counterproductive to the goal of getting married and staying married. And their profs are actively hostile against the institution of marriage. So that's why the Ruth Institute exists, is to deal with all that.
I thought academics were open-minded and open to dialogue and to hearing contrary opinions. I'm shocked to find an alternative view being presented here. Well,
I tell you, Pat, I'm the freest person in academic life today precisely because I don't have a job in a university. I can say what I want, and I'm accountable to my supporters, to my donors, to my listeners. I don't have to worry about a tenure committee or the people at the faculty club. I can say what I think is true.
Now, you mentioned the hookup culture. That's totally true, and of course, it doesn't begin in college, and it doesn't begin in high school. It begins in junior high. I have 2 girls, 4 and 6, and the commercials that are played on Nick Jr. are the tween shows. They're already, boyfriend, girlfriend, who likes who's kissing who, pitched to 5-year-olds. So this idea of, pushing even the idea of romance to a young child, it seems to me a setup to this premature experimentation with the opposite sex before they're even interested in it. So I think the hookup culture begins in junior high. You may have a different view. Do you think it starts about there, this idea of hooking up?
I think what you're saying is quite correct. I mean, I think it is striking how early children are being sexualized, not just at the commercials on Nickelodeon, but also in the advertisements, the kind of clothing that's made available, the little Bratz dolls, little things like that. Right. There's all kinds of stuff that really, when you think about it, it's quite twisted in a way. And so you have to ask yourself, what are we thinking? What are these adults thinking that are trying to promote early sexualization of young children? And I've come to the conclusion that the whole feminist versus non-feminist argument, that doesn't work anymore. What we really have out there are sex radicals versus sexual humanists. You know, that the
sexual humanists.
Yeah, and that's John Paul, of course. That's the Catholic position, is the humanist position, which says that male and female is something good and created by God, and not a cosmic accident, not a cosmic injustice, but in fact, male and female is something good for us, and our sexuality and our bodies are good for us. And the issue is how to use those things in the way that is going to be conducive to human flourishing. And what's happened with the sex law radicals is that they're basically saying that sex is a meaningless activity that has only the meaning that you personally assign to it. And so if you think it's okay, then it's okay. And if you pick out a partner, then it's okay that you've picked out the partner. The only thing that is not okay is lack of consent. That's the only issue, is whether there's consent or not. And so it doesn't matter how old you are. You know, if that 5-year-old could give meaningful consent, it'd be okay. You know, you want to do it with a dog. If the dog gives consent, you know, it's okay. So this is the way these people think, is that consent is the only issue. And whereas
this is not hyperbole.
No. I want your listeners to understand I'm not making this up, and I'm not trying to be alarmist or anything here. There are people actually in law schools teaching things like this, and specifically teaching that there's no necessary connection between marriage, procreation, child rearing, and sexual activity itself, you know, that all of those things can be split up and sort of parceled out to different people. And what I think is the case, and what science can show, and of course what Catholic Church teaches, is that unifying those things, unifying marriage and sex and your love for your spouse and your love for your kids, having all that wrapped up in the one bundle that says marriage on it, that is the most humane way to do it. And it's the most conducive to human flourishing. This is what makes us happy. And incidentally, if there are any fiscal conservatives listening out there, it's also the thing that keeps the state at bay. It keeps the size of the state as small as possible. You start peeling off those pieces, Pat, you're now talking about excuses for the government to get involved in people's lives because they got to clean up the mess. And that's why the sex law radicals like this stuff. That's why they like the idea of the legal parent being not the biological parent, and the caregiving parent maybe being somebody completely different from either of those, or maybe you give out educational rights to yet another person. I mean, this is how they think, and these are people who can't possibly have spent 5 minutes with an actual child. This is my conclusion, listening to them.
So once the link between, the causal link between sex and babies, between marriage and the stable environment for a child, once that link has been broken, your logic has a way of catching up with you, and you can't argue against these other things. I'm not that old. I was not an adult in the 60s, but the current drive for homosexual marriage, so-called, is a new thing.
Yes.
What do you say when people say, well, look, Dr. Morse, okay, you don't want to have a gay marriage? Then don't. You know, I support you, then you support me. How's my gay marriage affecting or undermining your heterosexual marriage?
Well, see, this confuses the individual with the systemic, you know, and your listeners are smart enough to understand this. I'm not sure a lot of people are smart enough to understand this. I tell you, the first time I heard this kind of question, I was at the editorial board for the LA Times arguing in favor of Proposition 8, and I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They're basically saying, well, look, since we've already let the cat out of the bag and let single mothers do what they want, and we've already allowed, and artificial reproductive technology, we've allowed all these kinds of situations where kids are not attached to their mom and their dad. Well, we might as well just let the same-sex couples do it too.
Just serve tea to Pandora and befriend her.
Yeah, and I'm all, wait a second. So we've done a whole series of injustices to children, and so therefore we have to do the next one too? I don't get that. You know, what we need to be doing is retracing our steps on some of those early injustices and retracting some of what we've done, because it hasn't worked and it hasn't made people happy. So that's part of the answer. But the other part of it is, how does your gay marriage affect my life, or however you want to put it? The fact is that if you redefine marriage, you're not just redefining marriage for the handful of same-sex couples who actually get married. You're changing the legal definition for everybody. So now, marriage will be the union of any two persons. That's what the law will say.
Back to the consent issue.
Wrapped
up in the consent of the parties.
Yeah, that's right. That's a part of it. But also, what the state is saying saying, implicit in that, Patrick, is that they're saying that mothers and fathers are completely interchangeable, that children don't really need a mom and a dad, that two moms and two dads are just as good as a mom and a dad. There's no intrinsic reason to prefer that. And furthermore, they're saying that there's no intrinsic reason to attach biological parents to their children.
Right.
Because within a same-sex marriage, if the same-sex marriage is going to attach children to parents in any kind of automatic procedure, they're going to necessarily be detaching a child from at least one bio parent, right? And so you're demoting biology as the basic principle in the society for how kids are attached to parents. That will affect everybody. I'm telling you, that will affect everybody.
Well, at least in one case it's in the news with the case of Debbie Rowe, the erstwhile wife of Michael Jackson, who was essentially a rent-a-womb. The children by Michael Jackson weren't even by Michael Jackson. It was not his sperm cells that created the baby that was inside Debbie Rowe. It was another woman, another man, independent of these two. So that the whole definition of parenthood and family is completely flexible and bendy, and this is part of the problem.
Well, it's huge, and I have to admit that I don't follow Michael Jackson and his escapades, and
you did know that he died.
I did know he died. Yeah, thanks, smarty. but look at it. In the state of California, it's possible for a child to have 5 legal parents, and you pretty much just set it out there. You can have the sperm donor, the egg donor, the gestational mother, that is the surrogate mother, and then an adoptive mother and father. So the only thing that was missing in this thing is that Debbie Rowe was both the surrogate and the adoptive mom. But they in principle could have separated that out too. And somehow people think this is a good thing. I don't know why they think it's a good thing, but they do.
Well, it's a nice segue. Cohabitation and adoption. You and your husband know quite a bit about adoption, and you're about to give expert testimony in Arkansas on adoption for cohabiting couples.
That's right.
Now, my homespun analysis on this is that the hookup culture created the cohabitation culture.
No question about that.
It's serial monogamy because it's there, and you hit it straight on, the fear of divorce and the fear of recreating the script of the pain of divorce, and yet not knowing how to recalibrate the script so you don't have to keep living it out. So what can you tell us about what's happening in Arkansas?
Well, in Arkansas, the voters passed a referendum that says that adoption and foster care can only be done by cannot be done any longer by cohabiting couples, and that is a gender-neutral situation. So whether it's a same-sex cohabiting couple, opposite-sex cohabiting couple, doesn't matter. No cohabiting couples are going to be allowed to foster and adopt in the state of Arkansas, and that's the law. And of course, the usual suspects are now challenging that law, saying that it's too big of an exclusion. You can protect children without doing something so drastic as that, and so on and so forth. And so I've been asked to offer some expert testimony on that, and what we're arguing is that cohabiting couples do in fact behave differently from married couples. There's no doubt about it. Cohabiting couples are less stable, and so when people are moving in with their boyfriend because they think that that's going to save them the pain of divorce, that's not really true, because you're 3 times more likely to break up with the boyfriend than you are with a husband. And so, okay, you're less attached to him because you're cohabiting rather than married. But think about what that means. It means you're holding yourself back all the time from actually giving yourself to the person. So the only way you're protecting yourself is not because you're cohabiting, but because you're holding on to the thing. So the cohabiting couples are more, the relationship is less stable. There's more violence within cohabiting couples. There's simply no question that the most dangerous person for a child, in terms of probability of committing violence against them, is the mother's cohabiting boyfriend. And because the cohabiting boyfriend is not interested in the mother's children, he's interested in her as a sex partner. He's not interested in these little kids who are like basically appendages and kind of in the way.
Or competitors.
Or competitors for attention, absolutely. Right. And so that's, there's plenty of research showing that that's the biggest hazard to children. And so, what the voters of Arkansas are trying to say is, look, if you really want to be foster parents within the state of Arkansas, get married. Give it up. You cut this out. And the claim that there aren't going to be enough foster parents, that doesn't work either, because there really aren't that many cohabiting couples that we're talking about in the grand scheme of things. You're not excluding that many people, but you are making a statement that you believe marriage is a significantly safer place for kids than cohabitation.
Okay, well, it's a good comma. We'll pick that comma up on the other side of the break here on Catholic Answers Live. We have to take, and we're talking about marriage specifically. Whatever happened to heterosexual monogamous marriage? How is it that marriage has put people who believe in the traditional definition of marriage on the defensive? Why do we have to, be shepherding this definition when for as long as people have been recording things, it meant the union of one man and one woman for life? Our guest is in studio here, Dr. Jennifer ROBACK MORSE. Welcome back, Dr. J.
Thanks for having me.
Well, a lot of people want to ask you questions. Let's start with Christian. Say hi to Christian in Oakland, California, listening on our great partner there, Immaculate Heart Radio, 1260 AM. Hey, Christian, welcome.
Hello, how are you, Patrick?
I'm great. Welcome. You're on the air.
I'm going to be somewhat provocative, and I'm going to preface this by saying, A, that I'm in my first marriage, and it's going on for 28 years, I think. Pretty close to it. So and it's to a woman.
Oh, good.
And, yeah, well, I'm glad. I thought okay. And I am really not in favor of gay marriage. However, I have to ask this question because people ask me sometimes. Okay, let's say we do not allow gay marriage, or the gay marriage does not pass, does not take in America as we're basically hoping. How far back in the establishment of gay rights are we going to go to take away rights? What other rights will we take away from gays next? And at what point what equilibrium will there be for genuine acceptance that there are people who just happen to be gay? And are not going to change.
Well, Christian, this is a very interesting question because the premise of the question is that if our side wins, we get to do whatever we want, and if their side wins, they get to do whatever they want. And, of course, that's not how politics work. So you're in California, I'm in California. We've been watching this thing play out. Now, let me just remind all of the listeners everywhere in the country that gay marriage does not exist in California. Proposition 8 won. Proposition 8 is now part of the California Constitution. We do not have gay marriage in California, period. I know that may be news to you guys up there in the Bay Area, but it's a fact. We don't have gay marriage in California. And in fact, there has been no increase in violence against gay people. Gay people are not losing their jobs. In fact, the opposite is true. It is heterosexual supporters of traditional marriage who have been losing their jobs because of pressure and harassment by the gay community. It's traditional supporters of traditional marriage who are being harassed and who are having problems because of the kind of pressure that's being asserted against them by members of the gay community. So it's not like one side gets to win. It's that we're in this dance right now, and where is it going to end? There's no telling where it's going to end. If we could just be realistic and look back to what happened prior to the Supreme Court in California imposing same-sex marriage. Just think about what we had in this state, Christian. We had very generous domestic partner benefits in the state of California that satisfied virtually all of the practical problems that a same-sex couple would encounter. And a lot of people thought to themselves, boy, this is a good compromise. We're saving the word marriage and reserving the word marriage for something, but we're helping our gay brothers and sisters solve their practical problems. But it turned out that was not good enough for them. It came from their side to bring a lawsuit within the state Supreme Court to say that, that this was separate but equal, and it was not good enough. So many of the compromises that people of goodwill have made with the gay community have turned out to be for nothing. Why? Because the gay community has not accepted them as a compromise. What we saw as a compromise, they saw as a stepping stone. So there isn't really a good answer to your question. I have no idea where the equilibrium is going to end up, and I'm aware that it doesn't depend on me how this turns out. There are two sides to this dance, and a lot depends on what they choose to do or not do.
Christian, how's that? Does that get you partway there?
Well, it gets me somewhere, but I want to ask you this, and I'll put it in the most provocative way I can. What would the Catholic Church like to see?
What do you mean, what would the Catholic Church like to see?
Would the Catholic Church agree? Does the Catholic Church agree with the domestic partnership situation that existed prior to the gay marriage fiasco.
Well, Patrick, you're the Catholic apologist. Why don't we let you answer that?
Well, yeah, it's not really a question of dogma, Christian. It's a question of common sense and the straight pardon the metaphor. The straight definition of marriage is the union of one man and one woman. To say that a gay civil union is not really the same as gay marriage, and therefore it's a nice compromise, is I believe, and you can go to Catholic.com. We have a product there. It's called it's a special report on gay marriage. I forget the exact title, but it's essentially it's antics with semantics to equalize same-sex relationships by calling them civil unions is really in effect to call them marriages without using the M word. So the Catholic Church also believes that while homosexuality is mysterious in its origins and vexing to those who have same-sex attractions that are not welcome, healing through the Holy Spirit and through repentance is also possible. And while there's no magic bullet, and sometimes it can be a great struggle, the Catholic Church promotes and has always promoted and always will that marriage ought to be seen as the union of one man and one woman for life with openness to children. That's the short version.
Okay. I think that's good. I basically like the way you're posing it. I'm asking the questions in a provocative way because, there was a time, not so long ago, perhaps, certainly in my lifetime, when people were, there was entrapment of homosexuals by police, following them into restrooms, all kinds of, the whole Stonewall riot business that happened in New York back in the 60s happened because of great persecution. And I hope we don't want to go back to that time.
Well, there's always, whenever you have a social movement that's new and is deliberately in your face because it wants to affect its own political ends, you're going to have a counter swing of the pendulum from law enforcement. I don't know anyone who disbelieves in that. But sex acts in public are illegal, and they ought not to happen, and people who do them should be arrested. So you're talking about the difference between use and abuse. But I agree that we're not going on any kind of witch hunt. The Catholic Church, it's codified in the Catechism, forbids and rejects all forms of unjust discrimination against homosexuals. So I hope that helps, Christian. You asked a really good question. I'm glad you posed it provocatively. We have to move on, and let's say hi now to Kathleen in Ventura, California, on EWTN.com listener. Hey, Kathleen, welcome.
Okay.
Well,
All right, try again. Hey, Kathleen, you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
I can hear you now. You're on the air. Go
great.
ahead.
Just a little background on myself. My husband and I were married outside of the Catholic Church. We were both Catholics, but he began drinking and tried to kill me, so I left with my children. And I had a couple boyfriends, but then I went back to the Catholic Church, and I've been celibate for like 15 years now, and it's not that hard, and it's kind of enjoyable. I'm kind of free about it. And anyway, my daughter, she was a single mother. She's 21, and she has a son, a year and a half, and she has a wonderful boyfriend. And at one point they said, let's leave sex out of the relationship, but they both went back into it. And the woman said with the Ruth Institute that 3 times more likely to split up with a boyfriend than a husband. And I wonder what I can say to her. He's a wonderful boy, and he calls me Mrs., and he's very respectful, and he's got Catholic in his background. And what can I say to her to realize that marriage is the way to go, not, I'm afraid it's going to lead to cohabiting and eventual breakup, and I think they should get together in a good way.
Well, Kathleen, I'm glad you asked me this question because, the thing with cohabitation is that it's a refusal to decide. Okay, it's the absence of a decision. So what you really want your daughter to do is to fish or cut bait, as they say. You want them if it's a good, nice, wholesome relationship, then you want to make it so that she can continue in a dating context with him for as long as it takes for them to decide and to discern whether they're really right for one another as marital partners. That's the point. And so, whatever support that she might need from you, I think that would be appropriate. Whether she needs a place to live that's not too expensive, and so you can help her out that way. Because a lot of times girls end up moving in with their boyfriends because they think it's cheaper, and in the short run it is cheaper, but in the long run it's very expensive. So the kind of support that you can offer her is to help her discern whether this is a good relationship. And you're correct in your instinct that it would be better if they remain chaste. But if I were you, I would really encourage you to keep the lines of communication as open as possible on this subject, so that you can be there for them as they discern and make their decision. And when they get to the point where it becomes obvious, what they should do, and where they have the maturity on board to do it, then you want to support whichever way they happen to be going. Now, may I ask, how old is the boyfriend?
The boyfriend? How old is he? Oh. He's 20.
He's 20. Okay, so she's right there. Is she listening?
Yeah, she's listening right now. She just walked in.
Oh, hi, honey. How are you? So look at the other thing you need to keep in mind is that your daughter is a 21-year-old single mom. On average, I'm guessing she's going to be more mature than the average 20-year-old guy who's not, who's not a father and who's not married and stuff. And that and you need to, I think it's well to be aware that if he gets married to her, he's going to have a lot of growing up to do really fast. And so, just because marriage helps men to mature, that's just I think a well-known fact. Common sense bears that out, and the data bears that out in different ways. So I would just have that in mind, that you're asking him to grow up pretty fast, and he may be up to it, and that may be a benefit to him. He may see that as a benefit, and so that's just a factor in the mix here, just the different ages of these two.
Isn't it true, Dr. J, that women who enter into a cohabitation relationship think that their stock is going up because they've said yes to at least that much, but really it's gone down because they I'm thinking of the old phrase, why buy the cow when you're getting the milk for free? When she says no to the one thing that may be ruining a good relationship or making a bad one feel good or look better, that she's actually undermining her own value, her own dignity and worth.
Well, you make a good point that the woman creates more credibility for herself and keeps her bargaining position much stronger if she doesn't move in.
Position of negotiation.
If you want to be crass about it like that, which I think at some point you have to be, and girls, especially young girls, have a tendency to get all romantic and teary-eyed about things. But if your daughter's a single mom, she's probably a little more down to earth. She's probably not going to go off into fantasy land. But Patrick makes a valuable point here that once you move in, your bargaining chips go away, because all of the inertia then is in favor of staying with that person, and your ability to bargain for better things within the relationship really, really goes down. And not to mention your own self-respect, which I think is a huge factor in all of this. That a woman's sense of respect for herself, by holding her sexuality in reserve for that special someone, that your star really does rise when you're able to do that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Kathleen.
Thank you very much, and my daughter's listening, and I really appreciate this sound advice.
Well, great, and we'll be on archives as of tomorrow, so you can just keep playing it back to her, maybe in the middle of the night on a subliminal level or whatever.
Okay, awesome.
Okay, well, you'll be in our prayers as well, Kathleen.
Or she could go to the Ruth Institute and buy a copy of my CD set that's called Smart Sex, which is a series of talks about sexuality, including some discussion about why married sex is really the smartest form of sex.
Yeah, Kathleen, that's ruthinstitute.org. ruthinstitute.org. Okay, Kathleen?
Institute.org. Thank you.
Right on. Okay, thanks for calling. Let's say hi now to Martha in lovely San Antonio, Texas, listening on Guadalupe Radio. Martha, welcome. You're on the air.
Thank you. A couple of callers ago, your guest mentioned that in her expert opinion, she's going to talk about how more likely children are to be abused by a male who is cohabitating and may have little or no interest in the children of the woman. How are you going to explain and defend the position of marriage and so forth and the law in Arkansas with those couples that really love one another, they don't believe in marriage, but want to adopt children because they can't have children?
Good question. Do you get the gist? What about?
Well, I mean, if this is a cohabiting couple and they really want to adopt children, what the law of Arkansas is basically saying is you need to get married. We need to see that you're committed to one another before we entrust a child to you. And it's quite true that if they were physically capable of having their own child, nobody would stop them. It wouldn't be possible to stop them. But with adoption, what you're doing is you're asking the state to give you parental rights to someone else's child. And so the state is simply saying, as a minimal condition, that you have a commitment to one another. And so I don't think the case that you are bringing up is particularly an argument one way or the other against what the people of Arkansas are trying to do with this law.
And this is married in the eyes of the state, not in some doctrinal dispensing organization. This is a secular.
No, that's right. That's right. Yeah, you
sphere.
could just go down to the county courthouse. You don't have to go to Catholic Church and do an NFP and all that stuff.
Right,
It's very minimal regulation that we're talking about here. Just go to the courthouse, do the little blood test, and pay your $20 or whatever it is.
Right.
Is there a possibility that law is going to be overturned? Is that why they're seeking your expert opinion?
Yes. There's a legal challenge to it, and so that's why I'm in live.
My question is, for those that might pose, they don't have to be married, and they will give all kinds of arguments in not against marriage, but in favor of the option of not. How are we as Catholics to defend, in that case, of somebody who actually is not using the other as a sexual partner or anything like that? It's not children of a previous union. We want to have children together. We just don't believe in marriage. How can you, as a Catholic, really defend that in light of what others are surely going to defend to make the opposite point?
Well, okay, first of all, I'm not defending the state's position as a Catholic. I'm defending the state's position as a social scientist, as an economist, and a student of social trends. And the basic argument is that cohabiting couples behave differently than married couples. That's the issue. And so you have the people, if this hypothetical couple that you're coming up with, if they really want to have kids, they can get married. They should be getting married. And the problem too is that that oftentimes the people who say we don't believe in marriage, what they're really saying is we're not willing to commit ourselves to one another. And this is a fairly, given that the state isn't actually checking your commitment, going around with a little clipboard and asking how close you are or anything like that, it isn't that much to ask that people that people actually do get married in the end. And by the way, let's keep in mind that in all cases, individual couples get screened. That's part of the process, and would continue to be part of the process. That people who are not suitable parents for various reasons are going to get screened out of the process.
Okay, Martha, thanks so much for that question. A lot of the questions have multi-tributaries possible in their answer.
That's right.
Unfortunately, we have to take another break here on the broadcast. We're joined by Dr. Jen Marriage, how to protect marriage and how to defend the traditional definition of marriage, which is actually good for everybody, not the least of which is children. This hour is called Whatever Happened to Heterosexual Monogamous Marriage, and our guest is Dr. Jennifer ROBACK MORSE. Good to have you. Thanks for not fleeing the room.
Oh, thank you. No, your callers are great. This is great fun.
Well, speaking of great fun, let's say hi to Mary now in St. Louis, Missouri, listening on AM 1080 Covenant Network, our great partner there. Hey, Mary, welcome to the show.
Hello. Doctor, in 1974, at a pro-life meeting, I was handed a sheet of paper that had Planned Parenthood World Population's 5-year plan on it. And it contained things like single people cohabiting without marriage, and the promotion of homosexuality, of course, the promotion of abortion. There were some other things in that 5-year plan, and while it took them a lot longer than 5 years, they have succeeded. And I'm wondering, could you speak to what you know about the role of this group of people? It's a little different than, blaming the our women's movement. It's a little bit different movement. Could you speak to that?
I'd be glad to, Mary. The first thing I have to say, though, is that I don't have any particular access to the archives of the Planned Parenthood International or, any particular insight into Margaret Sanger or any of those kind of people. But it does, from a distance, look like a conspiracy, doesn't it? You hate to be alarmist and hysterical about these things, but it does look like there's a group of people here who've got a pretty big agenda. And so what I propose is that we give a new name for this agenda and just call them sex radicals, these are people who want to radically deconstruct what sex is all about and say that sex is basically a meaningless act, that it's basically a recreational activity, and that people are entitled to unlimited sexual activity without ever having a live baby show up. And that, if you looked at those, kind of premises, that's what Planned Parenthood promotes, and that's what the whole kind of movement around them works on too. So NARAL and the National Organization for Women, that's why that view of sex, I think, Mary, is why the gay lobby works so closely with Planned Parenthood. On the face of it, you wouldn't think that gay individuals or lesbians would care about contraception and abortion because their kind of sex doesn't produce babies. But what they are interested in is a common view of what sex is about, which is that sex is an individual act, that it's a recreational act, and that you're entitled to act as if you have perfectly functioning contraception. So under that definition of what sex is about, of course, gay sex is the best sex because it never produces babies. You don't have to go to any trouble to keep it from producing babies. So I like to think, Mary, that what we're dealing with here is a contest between the sex radicals on one hand and people who believe in what I will call a humane sexuality or sex humanism, sexual humanism. That's what I think John Paul II's position really is to promote a view of human sexuality that really is humane for women, for men, and of course for children, and for the long-term good of society. And to me, those are where the battle lines are drawn. That's why I don't even like to use the word feminist anymore, because I think it's confusing. But I think you're completely correct that Planned Parenthood is deeply, deeply culpable in all of this that we're dealing with in the culture wars.
I think you alluded to the usual suspects earlier.
They would be amongst the usual suspects. Right. That's right.
Yeah, feminism. It's so 1972.
Who would think Planned Parenthood was trying to destroy marriage in 1974?
Well, but Mary, that's an interesting point. There's another group of people, and again, at the risk of sounding hysterical or overwrought, there's another group of people who have been trying to destroy marriage for a long time, and of course, that's the radical Marxists. I mean, they have been looking at marriage as an oppressive institution since the 19th century. Since the 1880s, they've been describing marriage, monogamous marriage, as the patriarchy, as something that's intrinsically oppressive, that's intrinsic to the capitalist system, and that you're never going to really have freedom until you both overthrow private property and monogamous marriage. They see marriage as a special case of class conflict, with the husband as the oppressive bourgeois and the wife as the proletariat oppressed person. And, Patrick's kind of chuckling at me over here, but they're serious. They're deadly serious. And so that way of looking at things, that gender differences are intrinsically a source of conflict, that's at the heart of a lot of stuff. And of course, Catholicism stands directly in opposition to that. We say that the differences between men and women are a source of goodness and joy, and it's when we come together that we most directly image God. That's what the theology of the body is all about. And so that's why I think that Catholic humanism and sexual humanism has so much to offer as the contrast to all of these things that we're talking about, including Planned Parenthood, including Marxism, including certain kinds of feminism. That's why Catholicism, I think, really does have a lot to offer everybody, not just Catholics.
Vive la différence.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. Hope that helps.
Thanks, Doctor. I appreciate it.
Okay, God bless Mary. Call back anytime. There's a scene in the 1950 movie Cheaper by the Dozen, starring Clifton Webb. It's a true story about a time-saving engineer. It's the Galbraith family. We're the real family. There's a scene in that movie that was shockingly dropped from the Steve Martin remake, where a Planned Parenthood lady comes in and begins to lecture the family on the absurdity of having so many kids. And the mother, not the father, the mother turns her out in her ear. It's a very funny scene. Of course, it would never show up in the remake, but it just
remember
shows
that
how
scene.
The cultural tide has turned. This is 1950 to 60 years later. Totally different.
I remember that
ethos.
scene. It's very funny when you see that old movie. You realize that the Planned Parenthood lady is the butt of the joke.
Right,
the
she's
joke
the
is
foil,
on her.
right. Correct.
The joke is on her, and the happy Galbraith family with all of their redheaded children. They're the ones having fun. They're the ones having joy, and of course the kids are up to all kinds of mischief, implicating the parents.
I think the theological term is hijinks.
Hijinks? Is that a theological term?
I think it's in one of the apocryphal Gospels.
I'm so glad to come to Catholic Answers and learn learn these things that I do not know.
We're givers. We're givers. Okay. Thank you for that, Mary. Let's go now to Tommaso in Troy, Michigan, listening on WDEL Radio. Tommaso, welcome.
Thank you. Dr. Jennifer, I have two quick questions. Why do the public school teacher unions support same-sex unions and do it as early in educating children in kindergarten? And the second question is why do you permit the word gay to be, I guess, pirated away from the regular vocabulary and used for same-sex or homosexual unions? Should we not fight that word being lost to the dictionary?
Okay, Tommaso, first of all, I choose my battles. You know, I work long hours every day, and that one I'm not willing to fight over the word gay at this particular point. There may be a time when you could do that, but I'm not willing to take that one on. What I do is I take on the claim that some persons are intrinsically gay or lesbian. And so very often what I will try to make a point to do is to say persons who have same-sex attraction, rather than to identify them solely as persons and say, you're a gay person. Well, no, you're not a gay person. You're a person. You're a man. You're a man, first of all. A gay man is, first of all, a man who has same-sex attraction. To try to break the link between thinking that your sexual orientation is, first of all, fixed, and second of all, that it's the core of who you are. So that's the place where I draw the line as far as terminology is concerned. Now, I want to ask you a question about the public schools teachers unions. I see that you're in Troy, Michigan. Is that right?
Yes, I am.
Are you involved in the education system, Tommaso?
I am, but I'm in a private school.
I see. Now,
and some of our local students, their parents have been very upset about it. I found about it only by reading these inexpensive, non-big thing newspapers. You know, the little local rags that are out there.
And some of them are promoting or are trying to call attention to the fact that same-sex unions are being promoted by the teachers' unions and being promoted in kindergarten and stuff like that. Is that the point?
Yes, they are.
Yeah.
And they want it to be accepted.
Yes. Now,
nothing different.
Okay. Now, I wanted to just clarify that for the sake of all the other listeners around the country, because I know this is going on in California as well. And a lot of people don't realize it until it's right in their face, because people can't quite accept that this is going on. So why is this happening? I think it's happening for the same reason as we talked about with the previous caller, which is that there is a group of people who are sex radicals, and promoting sexuality to the very young is part of their agenda. They want those young people to believe that sex is simply a recreational activity. And oddly enough, Tommaso, that they're promoting this stuff as if it's all natural and normal, but the truth is that it's very unnatural. Everything about same-sex unions, everything about contracepted sex, all of it's very unnatural, as a matter of fact. And so they have to be aggressively and vigorously promoting it all the time, kind of propping it up in order to keep it going. So much so that they got to be propagandizing kindergartners, which you wouldn't normally think would be necessary to do. So I think what has happened is that the teachers' unions have been hijacked by radicals. If there are people listening to me who are teachers, you need to get involved in your union and try to take back your union. And I say that with all due respect to people who are involved in this, that I know there are many Catholics who are involved in public education and who are involved in unions. And if Catholics in those positions would do what the church is teaching them, those unions could not be as crazy as they have turned out to be. So it's very important that you be salt and light in your own particular venue, whatever that might be. So I would really encourage all of our listeners who are involved in public education to be actively involved in your union and to try to stop this kind of thing from happening.
Okay, Tommaso, thank you so much for the call. We try to get a last couple of callers in here. Let's say hi now to Susan in New York, listening on EWTN Satellite on Sirius. Hey, Susan, welcome to the show.
Hi, I was just wondering what chastity in marriage is. And I'm not talking about the extremes of extramarital affairs or, pornography or anything like that. I'm talking about, what's the difference between, what's healthy sex in marriage versus lust?
You get the gist?
Well,
you get background noise there, Susan, unfortunately.
Well, I think so. I mean, first of all, I'm not willing to go into explicit detail over what kind of acts are permitted or not permitted, and I don't think that's what you're asking. Well, maybe that is what you're asking. If that's what you're asking, I would really suggest that you take it up with your confessor, rather than, bring it up on the radio. So that's the first point. The second point, I think, that is very important, as far as chastity and marriage is concerned, is for both parties to be open to the other. That your presumption is that you say yes to each other. That's the basic presumption, is that you say yes to the other person's desire. So I clown around with my teenagers, and tell them, for you, chastity means abstinence. For me, chastity means saying yes to daddy. That's what it means. I'm supposed to say yes to him. He's supposed to say yes to me, and we're supposed to be receptive to one another. So that's the basic thing. And if you have specific questions, I would really about whether there's something particular that you're doing or not doing that would count as being respectful and open to one another and so on. I would suggest you take it up with your confessor privately.
That's not exactly what I meant. I'm not talking about specific acts or anything like that. I'm just talking about the attitude.
Yes, I agree. So the attitude, I think we can speak to that. And I think, did what I say help with the understanding what the attitude ought to be, Susan?
Not really.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure I know what you're looking for there. I mean, of course you don't want to be using the other person. And so is your question really what counts as using?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. Well, again, this is a matter for discernment and also a matter for conversation between the two of you. And this is an area where the differences between men and women can be very tricky because what you think is normal, your husband may not think it is normal. You know what I mean? And so sometimes it can be difficult to have a conversation where you're even speaking the same language. So I would encourage you to to keep the lines of communication open on this matter, and you might want to talk to one of our apologists about this if you've got something specific to talk to.
Yeah, if you wanted to be, do you want to be put on hold, Susan, to get additional resources? Okay,
sure.
All right, we'll do. Well, I wish we had more time to talk, Dr. Morse.
Are we done?
It's the fastest hour of your day, isn't it?
Are you kidding? Are we done?
60 minutes.
I'm looking at the clock here.
I know.
We
stop at 5 to the hour.
Oh,
but it's been a great hour. Thanks for joining us here.
It has been fun.
Catholic Answers Live.
Thanks a lot.
Whatever happened to heterosexual monogamous marriage? This has been Dr. Jennifer ROBACK MORSE, and check her out at ruthinstitute.org. Tons of goodies there. Tons of information on how to defend marriage and explain it to people who want to continue to attack it. You can also get her talk on smart sex and books and a whole bunch of other products. ruthinstitute.org. This is Patrick Coffin. You've been listening to Catholic Answers Live. A week from today, we're going to be talking about the psychology of homosexuality with Dr. Joseph Nicolosi. That's next week. Tomorrow, our Q&A open forums, and we got a large set of shows coming up, so don't miss them. Catholic Answers Live. Until then, God bless and be well.